Wednesday edition of PFT PM. We are working our way through the first week of the 6-week PFT Live hiatus, and West Virginia Mountaineers still in the College World Series, beaten Troy twice, lost to North Carolina once, got to play North Carolina again today. By the time you see this, we may know whether or not West Virginia has managed to win against North Carolina to force another game against North Carolina. And then if West Virginia somehow beats the Tar Heels twice, West Virginia is in the best of 3 College World Series final, which is just amazing. We've never even been we. I can say we. I live here. I went to law school there. I can say we. I was born and raised in West Virginia. I went to West Virginia Law School. I have lived in West Virginia almost my entire life. I can say we. So we may be going to, not physically, I'll watch it on TV, but we may be in the finals after never being to the College World Series ever before this year. Back to the NFL, and there's still plenty going on. The offseason programs are winding to a conclusion in the cities where they still have yet to end. A lot of them ended last week. The Buccaneers have their mandatory minicamp this week. They canceled their final practice. It's always a nice little bone to throw to the players. But before we got to that point, Baker Mayfield spoke to reporters on Tuesday, and the question of his contract was revisited. The last time he had spoken to reporters, he said the number isn't anywhere close to where it needs to be. And then yesterday, he said a couple of things that I think are significant. One, there really hasn't been any progress, and he's not going to think about it. He's just going to take life one day at a time. That's all you can do. That's all you can do. And he has articulated an unofficial deadline of the start of training camp to get something done. It's not a real deadline, but if he's willing to adhere to it, and if his position is, once training camp opens, we're not talking, don't talk to me about this, then it all gets kicked until the end of the season. There's risk in that because if he goes into the final year of his contract without a new deal, he's carrying the risk of injury. He's carrying the risk of having a bad year. The Buccaneers assume the risk that he has a good year and his value goes up. I mean, if Baker Mayfield would end up being the league MVP without a new contract, I think at that point the Buccaneers would probably use the franchise tag. But remember, franchise tag is going to be close to $48 million for Mayfield based upon what his cap number is this year. His cap number is nearly 40 this year. That makes the franchise tag next year nearly 48. My understanding is the Buccaneers believe he will take their best offer before camp opens. That's step one. Whatever their best offer is before camp opens, he'll take it. That's what I believe the Bucs believe based upon the people I've talked to. And then the Buccaneers believe if push comes to shove, get through the season, if they don't tag him, and I don't think they will unless he is the league MVP or close to it, that's when the Buccaneers would believe, I believe, that no one else will offer Mayfield as much as the Buccaneers would offer. Remember, when he signed his latest deal, he had finished a 1-year contract with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, was headed for free agency, no franchise tag, and other teams weren't pursuing him. I had made the case the Vikings, when they were trying to figure out what they're going to do, Kirk Cousins, are we going to sign someone, are we going to draft someone? That was the year they signed Sam Darnold and drafted J.J. McCarthy. I was big on the bring Baker to Minnesota bandwagon because week 1 of the 2023 season, he beat the Vikings. Vikings were coming off of playoff berth, and they were favored in that game, and Mayfield was tough and gritty and had a big run, dropped the shoulder, old school. That leads to the other point as it relates to Mayfield, though. He pushed back against the idea that he's got durability issues. And look, he doesn't miss games. The problem is, and this goes all the way back to the 2021 season in Cleveland. Because remember, in 2020, they got to the final 8. And they gave the Chiefs a pretty good game in the divisional round after they blew out the Steelers. 2021, Mayfield had a decline in his performance driven by injuries, driven by his stubbornness, and I say that in a respectful way. He's determined to keep playing no matter what. He's not coming off the field. Now, some guys who refuse to come off the field still go out and play at a very high level, like a Matthew Stafford. Sometimes you're barely holding it together, and it's going to affect your play. The accumulation of injuries. Someone from the Buccaneers made the comment, it may have been Devin Lloyd after he retired, about all the injuries Baker Mayfield was playing through last year. And you respect that. But there is a point where you're hurting yourself and your team by insisting on continuing to play. We've used this example many times in the past. The starter at something less than 100% versus the backup at 100%. That's the analysis that every team has to go through when the starter is banged up. How low on the stack of 0 to 100% do we go before we take the 100% fully healthy backup? And Mayfield doesn't want to not play. And again, that's an admirable quality, but it gets him in a tough spot. Last year, the Buccaneers missed the playoffs. Last year, the Buccaneers disintegrated. You throw in the fact that Mayfield had a bunch of injuries, as Devin Lloyd said, and the more I think about it, the more I recall that to be the case. You're going to draw a line to Mayfield's ability to play at a high level when he's injured and insisting on playing, and his overall value. This is all about pegging his value, and that's the challenge in today's NFL, where the top of the market is $63 million and change, thanks to the new Patrick Mahomes contract, and for veteran quarterbacks, the bottom is around 20. Where does Baker Mayfield land between 20 and 63? When you consider that multiple other quarterbacks are north of 50, and you could look at them and say, I'd rather have Baker Mayfield, he could argue that his contract should start with a 5. The Buccaneers may want it to start with a 4. That's a $10 million per year difference. And those numbers add up quickly when you do 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. On a 4-year deal, it's a $40 million difference in total value. So they haven't gotten it done. I think that they're going to make him an offer that they believe he won't refuse before training camp opens, and they'll get it done. That's what I believe. I don't know that. But reading the tea leaves, understanding the patterns, doing this 25 years, my guess is they'll get a deal done before the start of training camp. And if they don't, who the hell knows what happens after that? That's when it gets very interesting for everyone. And the risk goes up significantly for Mayfield because injury or ineffectiveness impairs his value and leaves him with fewer options and a lesser contract, most likely, when the next year rolls around. And this is the one element about Mayfield that should not be overlooked. The Buccaneers may believe that if we get to March of next year and he's not tagged and he's due to hit the open market, that they'll offer more financially than anyone else will, and that may be the case. But by then, Baker Mayfield may go somewhere else and take less money. By then, Baker Mayfield may want to prove a point. By then, Baker Mayfield may say, I'd rather go to the team that is coming after me aggressively than the team that feels like it just has to placate me. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again right now. Pittsburgh would be a great destination for Baker Mayfield next year because what are they looking at next year? Mason Rudolph, Drew Aller, Will Howard. I'll take Baker Mayfield. Hell, I'd take Baker Mayfield now over Aaron Rodgers if I was the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not that that's going to happen. I'm just saying that would be my preference. All right. Now, I made a call for questions today, and I've got 4 or 5 that we'll do later, but one of them fits with this next topic. So let's go ahead and put it on the screen. It relates to another quarterback whose contract situation has been complicated by Patrick Mahomes' recent deal. Justin Rose asks, do you think Lamar Jackson signs before the season, and is $64 million the minimum at this point? I was watching the West Virginia game yesterday against Troy, and after it ended, it spilled over into Sports Center, and Jeremy Fowler eventually was on talking about Lamar's contract, and he made the comment the Ravens want to get this done. Well, the Ravens have wanted to get it done since the end of the last season. They had the press conference after John Harbaugh was fired. Steve Bisciotti talked about how they want to get it done, and it should be very simple. We have a post somewhere at PFT. I haven't gone back and looked at it, but I did a very simple mathematical equation, and it had to be simple if I was able to do it, that showed what the contract would look like. You're just bumping up the new money APY to $61 million per year at the time because $60 million was top of the market. Because you have to consider the background here. When Lamar did his latest deal, he was at 52.5, and that was number one. Since 2023, he has gone lower and lower and lower, and now he is more than 10 million behind the top of the market thanks to Patrick Mahomes. So 60 was the high water mark in January. Now it's 63. And I think it's as simple as looking at what he has left on the deal, adding new years that when you look at the new money average of the total deal, the new years end up being 63.5 or whatever it is, a little click above whatever Patrick Mahomes is at. It's doable. The question is, and Chris and I have argued about this, do the Ravens really want to do it? Look, Lamar is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And I know that someone out there, possibly someone who covers the Ravens, is going to cut a clip of this and put it on social media and bash me for it, and I really don't give a shit if you do. The point is, at some time in the relationship with Lamar Jackson, the Ravens are going to make a long-term decision about how long this lasts. They did it to Joe Flacco, who won a Super Bowl with the Ravens. They went out and got Lamar Jackson when Joe Flacco still had plenty of gas in the tank because they saw an opportunity to significantly upgrade the position, and they did. I just don't know because everyone's so tight-lipped about these negotiations. At Lamar's request, if it was up to him, nobody would even know how much he makes. Everything would be secret. And I can respect that. It's funny, like for the people in the media, when you see what someone's going to get paid, well, who's blabbing? Nobody talks about what I make. I don't talk about what I make. I don't have anybody who's a mouthpiece who's looking to advance their own agenda or prop me up by telling people how much I make. Some people, they want it out there. Some people don't. Lamar Jackson doesn't want out there what he's making. So it's all very discreet. It's all very secret. It's all very quiet. The impression is, because of what happened the last time around, that Lamar is the reason this hasn't gotten done. Because the last time around, it was the Ravens trying to do it, but they couldn't get Lamar to the table, especially once football season started, because he's acting as his own agent through his mother. He's focused on football. There were some reports to that effect as we were going through year 4 and 5 of Lamar Jackson's career. Because really, and look, I know the Lamar Jackson hive may not like this, but the reality is, if he had done his second deal after 3 seasons, like Josh Allen did, he'd already be into his third deal. He'd already be up at the upper echelon of the NFL like Josh Allen is now that Allen is in his third deal. There's a lot of money that gets left on the table by waiting, and that money never comes back. As it stands, Lamar's going to make $104 million over the next 2 years, as long as he qualifies for the workout bonus of $750,000 per year. But if we give him the credit for that $1.5 million, it's $104 over the next 2 years. It's $52 million a year in cash. And then the Ravens can't do anything about it when he becomes a free agent because he has a no tag clause. So his leverage, and I've said this before, he's got leverage. His leverage is, hey man, I'll be a free agent in 2 years, less than 2 years. What is it, 20 months now? I've got 2 more seasons, 34 regular season games to play, and then I can go anywhere I want. People around the league have believed for a long time he wants to play for the Dolphins, hometown of Miami. Oh, and Malik Willis, they've committed 2 years to him as a practical matter under his contract. Look, I don't think Lamar Jackson is going to slow down. I don't think Lamar Jackson is suddenly going to become anything other than a top 5 quarterback. But you're going to have the Ravens thinking about the future. You've got Lamar, who has to be thinking about the present and the future and where this is all heading. And the reality with quarterback contracts, the longer you wait, the more expensive it gets. With that caveat, that if you're the player and you wait 1 year, 2 years, you're going to lose money that you never make back. So there's a sweet spot toward getting a deal done. And if both sides were motivated, they could get this thing done in an afternoon. We'll see if they get something done before training camp opens. Because even though for Baker Mayfield, it's a made-up deadline, for Lamar, it's a more practical deadline because once training camp opens, he is working. He's not going to want to spend time negotiating his contract at the end of a long day of training camp. So we'll see. But Lamar holds many more cards in this conversation than folks realize because of that contract that allows him to become a true free agent, not franchise tagged. And we know what happened in 2023. Nobody even talked to him. Nobody made him an offer. Nobody showed any interest. Was it a result of collusion? I think it was. Next time around, you don't have to give up the Ravens anything. No compensation other than what they'd get through the compensatory draft pick process, but that's not out of your pocket if you're the team that signs him. All right, next up. As expected, George Pickens is at the Cowboys' mandatory minicamp. And he spoke to reporters yesterday, and he confirmed what should have been clear the moment he accepted his franchise tender. There never should have been a question that he was going to miss mandatory minicamp. Once he accepts the tender, he's all in. Now, I don't know why his agent advised him to not show up for OTAs, because if the goal is to have the best season possible, let's be there for everything. Let's take all the reps. Let's get ready to have the best season possible to either get tagged again or become a free agent next year, or maybe get tagged and traded. But I think Pickens has realized, even though the market is $15 million per year higher than what he's going to make this year, $27.298 million is a number no one ever would have expected George Pickens to be in line for this year. Not when he was traded before he was traded from the Steelers to the Cowboys. He looked like a guy who, almost like a Chase Claypool, showed some flashes, but then it all fell apart. That's what we felt like was going to happen. And he didn't. He was a second-team All-Pro. And I know CeeDee Lamb has the big contract, but as Sims has said many times on PFT Live, when he looks at the film, he sees that Pickens is the guy who's getting the attention, not Lamb. Pickens is the one that they are more afraid of than Lamb. So should he be being paid a lot more? Yes. Would anyone have ever dreamed he'd be making nearly $27.3 million this year? No. So you just got to wrap your brain around it, accept the fact that you're in checkmate. You can't get to the open market. The Cowboys hold the cards thanks to the CBA. It sucks, but that's what it is. All you can do is go out and have the best season possible and then put them in a box next year. Because if you have a really great year, yeah, they'll tag you again, but they'll probably come to the same conclusion they came to with Dak. He's going to leave next year. We can't let him leave. We've got to get a deal done. That's how Dak got his contract. At the time, it was 4 years, $160 million. And as I said at the time, it's a better deal than the Patrick Mahomes contract because it forces the Cowboys back to the table. And they've been back to the table. That's how Dak got to $60 million per year, because of the 4-year, $160 million deal that was done when the Cowboys were ready to tag him a second time and said, oh, shit, we're screwed next year. He's going to walk away. So it's smart for Pickens to be there. It was the only move for Pickens to be there, and it's good news for Cowboys fans. The better news would be Pickens signed to a long-term deal. And as I said, the moment Jerry Jones started talking about how George Pickens, a Monday night game against the Raiders, it was an opera, it was a ballet, it was poetry. If I'm CeeDee Lamb, I'm thinking, he's never said that about me. They may have to choose between Pickens and Lamb at some point. And that point could come as soon as next year. They're going to try to ride out this tandem as long as they can, but there's a good chance. End of the day, Lamb is the one who's not there, and Pickens is the guy who gets the long-term contract. We'll see how it plays out. I saw this last night before I went to bed, and I wanted to sleep on it before I wrote about it or talked about it. I wrote something at PFT earlier today. There has been now for weeks, if not months, political pressure applied to the NFL as it relates to the broadcast antitrust exemption created by the Sports Broadcasting Act of 1961. And by all indications, and we've been following this very closely, it's fascinating to me. And look, I fully admit I'm employed by NBC. PFT is an independent entity that I completely own, but I also work for NBC. PFT content is licensed to NBC. PFT is truly an independent entity, but I'm employed by NBC on Football Night in America and PFT Live, et cetera. So look, I admit my bias if I even have one. At least the relationship requires me to say, hey, NBC is kind of in the same bucket as Fox here, as the NFL is going around potentially trying to get more money from its over-the-air broadcast partners with this subtle threat, we'll sell your package to a streamer if you don't. But that's the root of all this. The NFL, upset by the magnitude of the current NBA contracts, decided we're going to go back to the table and we're going to try to squeeze more money out of our current partners, not when these deals expire, right now. Now, it hasn't happened yet. CBS has been talking to the NFL on and off for months. There's been no new deal. The thinking was they're going to start at CBS, they're going to go to Fox, then maybe, I don't know, they go to Amazon, they go to NBC, and ultimately they go to ESPN, ABC, which has a deal that runs through 2030, not 2029. Everybody else, 2029. But the point is this. Rupert Murdoch, who ultimately owns Fox, didn't like it, and he started lighting all sorts of political fuses and creating real pressure for the NFL as it relates to the broadcast antitrust exemption. And there's two questions. One, does selling these packages to streamers or satellite services or cable, does that in and of itself violate the exemption? Number two, is it time for the exemption to just go away and the NFL not be allowed to sell its TV rights as a group, every team for itself? So that's all kind of out of the bag now. There was a hearing last week before the House Judiciary Committee. John Orend has reported that there's going to be some sort of legislation aimed at adjusting or tweaking the Sports Broadcasting Act and specifically the antitrust exemption. The NFL's behavior as it relates to this entire issue is fascinating to me because I think what they'd like to do is just ignore it and hope it all goes away. Because if you engage you give it credibility. You turn it into a story. It's hard for a story to become a story if there aren't two sides to it. So if it's just one-way political noise, okay, it maybe withers and disappears. When you've got a back and forth that keeps being fed with one cycle after another of response, counter-response, outrage, counter-outrage, it becomes a bigger deal. So the only thing the NFL had done so far, they've tried to make this case based upon the argument that 87% of all games are televised on free broadcast TV, which is an inherently flawed argument because you don't get 87% of the games for free if you are in a given market. Yes, in the local markets, 87% of all games are free. Collectively, no. It's a much lower number, and Congress has locked onto that and basically called the NFL disingenuous for trying to push this idea that 87% of all games are available for free. That's not going to make this go away. They tried it. They pushed it. And I think what they're doing now, and this is where the Packers come into the mix, I think the NFL's next step in this effort to push back against potential changes to the broadcast antitrust exemption is by focusing on this idea that it's going to kill the Packers if the antitrust exemption goes away. Because the Packers are a small market team and they can't compete with these other teams if all the teams have to go sell their own TV packages. And coupled with that is something that Ed Policy, the new for about a year, it's still new, honeymoon's not over yet, CEO of the Packers had said because teams can sell pieces of their franchise to private equity and we can't because the Packers have a publicly traded reality that isn't really publicly traded because it's not like you can sell your shares. They do this weird fundraising thing where they give you a piece of paper that's suitable for framing in your man cave that shows that you own a piece of the Packers so you can legitimately say we, but you can't do anything with it. You can't sell it. So Jeff Bezos couldn't show up and start buying up Packers shares and acquire ownership of the team. They're never going to have a majority owner. There's no way they're going to change the structure of this team because too many people own pieces and those pieces aren't transferable. So the Packers have become, I think, the NFL's poster child for the idea that, hey, if you take away the antitrust exemption and everybody has to sell their own TV rights, the Packers will die. It's an existential threat. I mean, you know something has gotten someone's attention when they start arguing that if we don't get what we want, it's an existential threat. And how many times are we going to have to hear people claim something is an existential threat before we realize that's just chicken little sky is falling bullshit? Now, as it relates to the Packers, yes, it's a small market. They're not going away. All they could ever do is dissolve. And I've seen the bylaws. They would dissolve and then the proceeds go to a charity that the Packers designate. They can't move. They can't sell. They can't do anything other than continue to operate. They're not going to go away. The reality is this, even though they're in a small market, they are the Green Bay Packers. If you're going to try to find a poster child for small market dynamics in an age where there's no antitrust exemption, the Packers aren't it. Because if every team has to sell its own rights, the Cowboys would get the most. The Jaguars, sorry, Jaguars fans, but you know, they would get the least. The Packers are going to be closer to the Cowboys than the Jaguars, if it ever comes to that. I mean, come on, they're the Packers. It's the frozen tundra. It's Lambeau Field. They're the NFL's answer to Notre Dame. They're going to get a very valuable individual TV package if this ever happens. They'll probably make more money if there's no broadcast antitrust exemption. But just like they did last year when they were the ones that proposed the tush-push ban at the behest of the league, every once in a while, the Packers will take one for the team. The Packers will be the team that stands up. And that's why I reject this idea that there's any sort of threat to the Packers. It's actually better for the Packers if they can sell their own TV rights because they'll make more money than sharing it 32 ways. All you have to do is come in above the average. Whatever the average is that gets split between 32 teams. What is it, 432 million per team? All you got to do is a little better than that, and you're ahead of the game. I think the deeper issue here is it shows that the NFL is concerned about what may happen with the antitrust exemption. I don't think it's going to go away, but it could get tweaked. And those tweaks could be problematic for the NFL. If this thing didn't have the NFL's attention, there wouldn't be a statement issued by the Green Bay Packers pushing back against the assault on the broadcast antitrust exemption. All right, let's answer a few questions before we wrap this up. Got a little time here. I got a hard out in about 15 minutes. I think we can get it done by then. Let's see the first one. Kristen, put it up there. I can't remember what it is. Here we go. This comes from Will. Why do so many teams that are having a quarterback competition wait until so late in the offseason / training camp to name a starter when it clearly hurts the team's ability to be as ready for the season as possible? That's the balance. You want to have the best player at quarterback, but at some point you've got to pivot to getting the guy who wins the competition ready to go. That's why you want to get these things resolved. That's why I think the Browns would have liked to have been able to announce a starter at the end of the offseason program. And the Vikings probably would have liked to do the same thing. Hey, at the end of the day, the best guy's got to play because you got to answer the locker room. And the players can see, and the players will have opinions. There aren't going to be veteran players who say, hey, you know, I know that Kyler Murray is clearly better than J.J. McCarthy, but I understand you want to try to get McCarthy to reach his ceiling and you want to be patient with him. Or the flip side is, in Minnesota, quite possibly, hey, you know, right now, J.J. McCarthy is looking pretty good and Kyler Murray is kind of behind, but we're thinking long-term. We're thinking postseason. By the time we get to week 18, Murray's going to be a lot better. Can you get the players to buy in? And in Minnesota, the key buy-in, I think, is Justin Jefferson. If he buys in, then everybody else is going to buy in because he's the one most affected by the quality of the quarterback play. He's the highest paid guy on the team right now. If he's on board with it, then I think the rest of the locker room will be on board with it. But they do it because they have to answer the question. They got no choice. They got to figure out who's better. They don't want to make a premature decision, but if you make it too late, you put yourself in a position, and I've said this many times about quarterback competitions. What does the guy win? You know what he wins? He wins the privilege to be the first guy benched when the inevitable benching of the week 1 starter happens because the team is starting to feel its season fall apart. And what can we do to turn things around? Hey, we got another guy at quarterback who took a bunch of reps during the offseason and training camp and the preseason. Let's give him a shot. All right, next question. Lee Dale. Greetings from the UK. Greetings, UK. Which of the Flores, Gruden, or Sunday ticket cases do you expect will take the next step first, or will be at something else? Sorensen, maybe. I assume you mean Sorsby, and there could be some sort of litigation as it relates to Brendan Sorsby, especially if the NFL doesn't allow him to enter the supplemental draft. I think there will be an immediate lawsuit with a request for a temporary restraining order, preliminary injunction, anything else that Jeffrey Kessler will ask for to force Sorsby into the supplemental draft. So that could happen if the NFL says to Sorsby, we're not letting you in the supplemental draft. For now, no indication that the NFL will keep him out of the supplemental draft. But there's a vibe out there that the league is trying to cook something up. I was talking to somebody just before we got started, and there's a vibe that they're trying to figure out what they can do as it relates to a potential suspension, like they did to Terrell Pryor. The problem is they didn't do anything to Kayshon Boutte, who has a fact pattern that is very similar to Brendan Sorsby's. The only difference is the NFL didn't find out about it until Boutte was in the NFL for a full season. And Jim Harbaugh, who came back to the NFL with plenty of smoke and heat and ultimately a suspension imposed by the NCAA, and the NFL didn't do anything about that. So that could happen if the NFL says no to his application to enter the supplemental draft. But between Flores, Gruden, and the Sunday ticket case, I think the next thing is going to happen, and it could happen today. It could happen at any time. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, that's the federal appellate court that has jurisdiction over California federal district lawsuits. They have in their hands everything they need to reach a decision on the status of the verdict that was rendered 2 years ago. $4 billion plus against the NFL for antitrust violations related to the pricing of Sunday ticket. The judge threw out the entire verdict based upon concerns that the expert witnesses who came in to testify and provided the model to determine the damages, it wasn't good enough. So they didn't throw out the finding that the NFL violated the antitrust laws. They only threw out the number that the jury came back with. There's got to be some damage. That's the thing that's been lost in all of this. A jury has found that the NFL violated the antitrust laws by requiring Sunday Ticket to be priced at a number that would discourage fans from getting it and encourage them to just watch what's available on their local Fox and CBS affiliates, even if they'd rather watch another team that doesn't play in the market that Fox and CBS serves. That ruling from the Ninth Circuit, and who knows what it's going to be, that ruling could come at any time. And there's still the possibility of an injunction against the NFL that forces them to blow up Sunday Ticket. That's separate from whatever the verdict is, but the violation continues. That's what's amazing to me. It's how brazen folks can be. They are still operating Sunday Ticket the way they always have, even though a jury found 2 years ago that the way they operated is an antitrust violation. So I think that's the next one. Flores and Gruden, they are in the discovery phase. And that there will be skirmishes, there will be snippets of testimony, there will be court filings, and barring a settlement or a dismissal, there will be a trial. So those will take more time. Sunday Ticket appeal coming potentially very, very soon. It could come, as I said, at any time. Next question. Tad Funderman. If the quarterback competition in Minnesota is a true dead heat in training camp, seems to be that after minicamp, McCarthy has to be the starter, right? You're more invested in JJ than Kyler, and it makes team building much easier moving forward. Does Kyler then ask for a trade too? Hey, I don't think Kyler Murray took that job with the understanding that there was a good chance he was going to be the backup. I think the Vikings learned their lesson from 2025. Daniel Jones chose to sign with the Colts because the Colts made it more clear to him that he had a chance to be the starter. In Minnesota, he thought McCarthy was going to win the job. He thought that Kevin O'Connell is going to coach McCarthy up and he's going to be the starter and Jones is going to be the insurance policy. An insurance policy who would have been used repeatedly last year and may have supplanted McCarthy during the season. But in Indy, he was able to walk in and be the starter. I think, given that Kyler Murray did a one-year deal for the minimum, now it doesn't matter. Anything up to $38 million isn't going to change his bottom line unless they would have done what the Raiders did with Kirk Cousins. There is a way to circumvent and throw in some more money, but Murray didn't do that. I think Murray went to Minnesota to start. And if he doesn't get that job, there's going to be a problem. We remember what happened when he was eligible for a new contract. The Cardinals hadn't given him one. His agent did that single-spaced Twitter manifesto. It'll get ugly if Kyler doesn't get the job. Because the argument will be, I really didn't have a fair shake. I don't know this offense. Kyler's already said, I've got to split reps. It's tough to compete when you have to split reps. I don't know that he said that to set up the excuse, but that's what the excuse will be. And that's where it gets back to what I was saying earlier. Maybe McCarthy looks like the better option as week one approaches, but if you're doing a projection as to where Kyler Murray is going to be come week 18, he may be the better option. And the Vikings haven't won a playoff game since 2019. And even though Kevin O'Connell has had a great regular season record, he's 0-2 in the postseason. This isn't about beating the Packers week one. This is about trying to win the division. This is about trying to position yourself to win a postseason game. All right, what do we got next? Hanson Williams, what will the league do, if anything, about player complaints that the World Cup has been playing on grass in stadiums where NFL players are playing on turf? They won't do anything. They won't do anything. I made this point the other day. This is now a collective bargaining issue. There is nothing the players can do to force the owners to choose to spend the money necessary to have high-quality grass in every venue. And the owners know this is something the players need to ask for at the bargaining table. And the way collective bargaining works, you get so many things you're trying to get, and you have to give something to get something. That's the simplest way to explain it. You're just trading back and forth. We want this, well, we want this. Well, I want this, well, we want this. So for the players to make grass fields one of the things they want, they got to give up something else that they'd otherwise want. And that assumes that the NFL is even willing to engage. Like people have said over the years, oh, the players need to get rid of the franchise tag. Well, the league's never going to give up the franchise tag. They're never going to give it up. So don't bother asking. Now, I've said, and I believe that this is an opportunity to divide and conquer because there are plenty of teams that have high-quality grass fields. They're like, fine, works for us. Doesn't cost us a penny. We're already spending the money necessary. Hell, the Bills chose. They chose to put grass in their new stadium instead of turf. I bet the league office didn't like that because right now it's going to be hold the rope when it comes to turf because it is a collective bargaining issue. So it all comes down to whether or not the players would ever strike over the grass versus turf issue, and I don't think they will. So I don't think it's going to happen. Unless they're willing to give up something else they really want in order to get grass in every stadium, it's not going to happen. And yes, the World Cup makes glaring the fact that the owners who want grass can put grass in. They just don't want to spend the money necessary to have a grass field in every stadium. It makes things more expensive. It complicates your ability to have other events. It's a lot to maintain. It's a lot cheaper to just lay a carpet than to grow a garden. I did see something that I wanted to mention. Just two things real quick before we go, because I got to go here in a couple minutes. Number one, I don't know what these teams are getting from hosting World Cup games, but it's got to be a lot, because look at what they've done. They're putting in the grass fields no matter what it costs. They are canceling all other events they would have hosted this summer during the FIFA takeover. And they're dumping the names to the stadiums to the point where, and this is hilarious to me, in Gillette Stadium, do we have the photo? They had to go around and put Department of Justice redaction tape on every seat in the building. Thanks to Kyle Sheldon for catching it. And I confirmed, yes, they went to every seat, all 64,146 of them, and put that tape over the Gillette Stadium. Every indication of Gillette Stadium had to be removed, and that's true of every stadium. I bet they're getting a lot of money to host these games. The last point is this. I saw that Albert Breer had said that if there was only one team at SoFi Stadium, they would have grass. And I reached out to him to make sure that he had said that, because I don't want to bash him for this. That may be true. If there was only one team at SoFi Stadium, they would have grass. Okay, fine. There was never going to be only one team at SoFi Stadium. That's the flaw. So I don't know if Kevin Demoff is trying to score brownie points with someone and they're trying to say, oh, hey, if we only had one team here, if it wasn't for those pesky Chargers, we'd have a grass field. They'd never have one team there. The stadium was designed and presented to the owners as a two-team stadium. Back when they did, more than a decade ago, the presentations, it was Carson, the Chargers, and the Raiders together, and it was SoFi. And the committee favored Carson. Then it was time for the presentations, and SoFi blew them away. And from the moment SoFi was presented, it was as a two-team stadium. The question was it going to be the Raiders or the Chargers? And the Rams wanted the Chargers. You know why the Rams wanted the Chargers? The Rams don't want to compete with the Raiders in the LA market. They're having a hard enough time competing with the Raiders when they're in the Las Vegas market. So if you see that anywhere, that, there'd only be one team at SoFi, we'd have grass. There was never, ever, ever, ever going to be only one team at SoFi Stadium. So that claim is basically the stuff you'd use to make grass grow. That's it for today's PFT PM. Thanks, as always, for some of your time. Check us out around the clock at profootballtalk.com. We'll see you back here again tomorrow. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.